My mother said, and I didn't realize how well it worked because I wasn't conscious of it. But when I bring a drawing to her, she said, I don't look at the drawing, I looked at the child. And if the child was excited, I got excited. And then we could discuss it because, we're bringing something that meant something to me as a child. And so she would join in my lassitude or my excitement or my frustration. And she wasn't a psychologist, but she did understand this simple matter, which always comes back to, it accomplishes the only thing that has any meaning to a little child. The only thing that an adult can give a child is time. That's all. There isn't anything else. If you give them time, that's what they need, and that's the only thing they need, really, is time. And if you give them time, you have to be understanding of them when you give them time. I went through art school, and I came out of there. I was hoping, this was 1931, and that was right in the Depression. The Depression hit in 1929, 2 years before Franklin Roosevelt came in, and the whole United States was boom, flat. To expect to get a job when probably 3 out of every 10 people were unemployed was ridiculous, and particularly a kid coming out without any experience in anything. Well, I'd helped, to a certain extent, I'd helped work my way through art school by being a janitor. But when I came out, one of my friends who had been at Chenard with me had gone to work with Walt Disney's ex-partner, a man by the peculiar name of Ubby Iwerks. And he was the one that animated most of the Disney stuff. Disney was not a good animator. He didn't draw well at all. But he was a great idea man, always was, and a good writer. And Iwerks was a great artist and a great animator. And he started his own studio. Somebody convinced him that he was the brains of the outfit and the talent, so he left. Anyway, he was hiring people, and he hired this friend of mine named Fred Kopetz. And Fred called me up and asked me if I wanted to go to work. So, to my extreme astonishment, which has for 63 years held, I'm still astonished that somebody would offer me a job and pay me to do what I wanted to do. And to this day, that's been the astonishment of my life and the delight of my life and the wonder of my life and the puzzlement that anybody would be so stupid as to be willing to do that. And I hear all these success stories of people, these captains of industry and so on, these forgers of the world and empire builders and so on. And they talk about all the money they made and become presidents and all that. And I thought, geez, but look at me. I never, when I was offered a chance to be head of studios, I wouldn't take it. I like to work with the tools of my trade, and the tools of my trade is a lot of paper and a pencil, and that's all it is.
It's not unusual to see a film more than once these days, but when I was a kid, you were odd if you saw a film more than once. And if you saw it more than once, you saw it twice. No one ever saw it more than twice. And my mom told me that some other parents and her parents thought they were a little indulgent by letting me go see movies more than once. But there were some that I wanted to see more than once.
Which ones?
Well, Pinocchio was one of them. And Sword in the Stone I really liked anyway, when I was about 11, I saw Jungle Book. And we happened to be, it was the only Christmas we spent in San Diego. So we had always been at home, and I had always, we were out of town, and it was playing in a big theater, and we went out to see it, and it was the only time that someone who was in animation was in the car with us. And I think it was some kind of fluke spiritual thing, because I saw the movie and it struck me in a way that it had never before. I'd seen a lot of animation before, but it clicked in me that somebody did this as a job. I knew intellectually that there were, the encyclopedia had a thing about animation and it showed that there were many drawings. But it didn't connect with me that when the panther moved, it wasn't just any creature, it was a cat. And it wasn't just a cat, it was a panther. And it wasn't just a panther, it was a panther with a stuffy attitude. And I realized that was somebody's job, to figure out how a stuffy panther would move.
Would move, yeah.
And I thought, that is a blanking cool job, you know? And that maybe being an adult is not going to be dull. Maybe it's infinitely interesting. And so I said, how do you do that? And one of the guys in the car, and it's the only time I've been in the car with that guy. He was a friend of the family somehow, but that's the only time we were together. I said, how do they do that? And he said, well, they do a lot of drawings, and each drawing is slightly different. I said, I know that. I said, how do I do it? And he says, well, you get a camera. He had taken an animation class at UCLA. Okay. And he said, you get a camera and you put it on a stand so that it doesn't move. Then you put a chalkboard down underneath it, and you draw something on the chalkboard. You get the camera so that it can shoot single frame at a time, and you shoot a frame, and then you change the chalkboard drawing. And so my dad found a used camera that could shoot one frame at a time. We jerry-rigged it on top of an enlarger stand. He had a half-finished enlarger.
You made your own animation stand.
Yeah, we kind of put it in and stuffed it full of newspaper so it didn't move around a lot. And then instead of pegs, my dad, who was kind of an ingenious guy, just made a corner with tape, just laying down several things of tape until it was raised. And then you would slide the drawing into the corner. Right. And I very quickly learned that chalkboard bullshit, no. Because you can't see what you did before. Right. Once you erase it, you can't see. So you can only kind of amend it, and then it looks like humorous phases of funny faces. Does anybody know that? Animation historians out there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, H. Stuart Blackton. Anyway, one of the earliest animated films. It looks weird. It doesn't look great. So within like 2 weeks, I was onto paper, and then I was off to the races. I started a film, and I finished it 3 years later. And my parents said to me, you should always go to the top first. Go to the very top, and then if they say no, you go to the next best, and then you go to the next best. That way, whoever actually bites, who actually agrees to give some time to you, they're the best people you can get. But start at the top, and then keep getting no's, and you're going to get a few no's, but you never know. Try it and see what they say. And so I sent it to Disney. I considered them the best.
I mean, I love film. I love going to see films, but I grew up in a family in Southern California, Whittier, California, where my mother was an art teacher.
Is that Richard Nixon's hometown?
It sure is. Right. Yeah, I was going to high school through a Watergate and stuff. That was very interesting. And my mother was an art teacher, and I was surrounded by the arts, and I drew all the time, and we had fantastic art departments in my junior high and high school. And when I was a freshman in high school, I read a book on how Walt Disney made animated films, and it dawned on me, wait a minute, people actually make cartoons for a living? I said, that's what I want to do. And my mom, I was so blessed to be in this family, because my mom always thought the arts was a noble profession. And so I went to after graduating high school, I went to, in the very first year of the character animation program at the California Institute of the Arts. And it was this amazing program that taught the Disney style of animation, where they brought all these great Disney animators and artists out of retirement to be our teachers. We didn't really think about it at the time, but we were so lucky, because they just taught for a few short years to get the program going. My fellow students in the first 2 years at the Cal Arts character animation program were Tim Burton, Brad Bird, John Musker, so on. It's all these leaders of the industry now, that we were all together and being taught by these great artists. And I realized at the time, and then when I went to work for the Disney studio, I was mentored by Ollie Johnston and Frank Thomas and Wooly Reitherman and Eric Lloyd, these great Disney animators who were the 9 old men. They were right at the end of their careers when they were retiring.
But they mentored
you. And I realized that they, at the time, looking back, they were handing the torch off to us. They wanted to keep this art form that they had developed with Walt Disney going to the next generation. And they looked at us as the leaders. And I didn't think about that until looking back, when I was older.
My dad is a cartoonist. He draws the Family Circus. It's in about 1,400 newspapers in America. And to me, it was the most natural thing in the world to want to be an artist when I grew up. And that's always what I've wanted to be. Ever since I can remember, I've drawn. I've always been just drawing, like my dad. And so then all the way up through school, I drew. And then I really got interested in sports and football. And by the time I graduated from high school, I had a choice of either go to play football for Arizona State University or to go to art school. And I sent my portfolio to art school out in California that Walt Disney had started. And I got a letter back saying that I was accepted into the School of Film Graphics. And I found out that film graphics was a kind of a fancy way of saying cartoons. That's what it was. It was animation. And I discovered that animation was a combination of all the arts together. It was singing, music, design, drama, drawing, painting, everything rolled into one. And I just fell in love with it.
Well, it was reading the newspaper comic strips, and I can go clear back as far as Winslow McKay as one of the influences. But I would say that Barney Google and Happy Hooligan, and later on the Disney comics of Mickey Mouse were the influences. I liked the Mickey Mouse stories because they had humor in them. And when you look at my later stories in the comic books, you'll see that I was kind of following the format that Floyd Godfredson established, of having Mickey and the other guys involved in funny situations at the same time they were having serious problems. And they solved their serious problems by funny means, some outrageous sort of thing that would happen. And I guess that is where I automatically formed the basis for my own story writing.
And I know you had a lot of different careers.
I wouldn't call them careers. I was a real misfit. I couldn't do anything good.
Can you tell us some of the things you did?
Oh, I started out, I wanted to be a cartoonist, of course, all of my life, from the time I was a kid, but that required a little bit of training, and being a kid on a ranch up in eastern Oregon, I didn't have much opportunity to meet other cartoonists or learn anything, but I did do a lot of drawing, looking at the San Francisco Examiner and the other newspapers we would get that carried comic strips. But I just automatically had to drift into farming and driving a bunch of mules around a field behind a plow or a grain drill or something. It just wasn't anything that I liked. And from that, I finally saved up enough money to tell my dad that I wanted to go to San Francisco and see if I couldn't get into cartooning down there. So I went to San Francisco and I worked for a little over a year in a printing shop. Yeah, it had nothing to do with cartooning, but it was at least a living while I would go once in a while to one of the newspaper offices and show them some sample cartoons and get rejected and practically thrown out of the place. They had good cartoonists working for them in those days. They didn't have to take on some kid that didn't have any training. But I could read all those wonderful newspapers full of cartoons, and I learned a great deal while I was there in San Francisco. Then after I left there, I had to go back to the ranch again. And from there, I drifted into logging, working in the logging woods. And from there, I drifted into working for the railroad in the car shops on a riveting gang. I was there for about 6.5 years on that lousy riveting gang. And in the meantime, I kept always trying to develop cartooning. And I realized that in order to sell cartoons, you have to have an idea behind them, a little bit of writing to go along with them. So I began developing the art of writing a little humor to go with my cartoons. So I got to selling gags to the Calgary Eye Opener, and that led to me getting a job back there as staff artist, and from that it was just a step into the editor job as they gradually got less and less money through the Depression and they couldn't hire any editors. It just developed on me to do it all. So from there I got into Disney's by sending some samples to Disney's. So my whole life was just devoted to trying one step after another toward becoming a cartoonist.